I can't ask you to continue with me on this dangerous quest. Name the port of your choice and I'll take you there. I'm Chris Spivey.
And I'm Eddy Webb.
And today we're here to talk about the Pirates of Darkwater, a legendary 1990 cartoon that changed the course of animation and toys. If everyone could see how pained Eddy looked when I said how it changed the course of animation toys, he was like, no.
It did not do any of those things.
Oh, Eddy, it feels weird to be at the end of the toyetic run.
Really? Why?
I probably could have done another 4 episodes of this before I was burnt out on
it. That's good, though. I mean, it's better that we get out when we're still hungry than going, oh, thank God this fucking run is over,
Because now I'm almost really thinking we should have covered G.I. Joe.
Maybe at some point.
And some Transformers.
Save the big ones for another time,
I guess you're right. Eddy always talking sense. Had you seen Pirates of Darkwater before?
I have never seen a frame of Pirates of Darkwater before this.
Interesting. I'm not going to ask what you think yet, because we'll get there eventually. Intriguing. I'm not surprised as... Okay. So I like to give this point of reference. As always, I am behind in my watching, and I'm watching almost at the last minute. And so I was watching this yesterday, and Jill comes into the room. It's like, what are you watching? And I told her about it. She's like, huh. And stared at me for a minute. It's like, did you choose to watch this? It's like, yes, I chose to make Eddy watch this show. And she's like, huh. And then she left. So that's a recap of her realizing what our friendship is.
That seems consistent with my understanding of the impact Pirates of Darkwater has had culturally.
Yes. And I purposely reference it like that because that's what it was. Although surprising, because one of the things I did get a chance to tell her is that it existed for about a year, really. Mm-hmm. But during that year, it had made enough of an impact that eventually it'll have 2 video games that came out of this, Eddy. Did you know about those?
I knew one of them. I didn't realize there were 2 of them.
Yeah. God, there was like a Super NES and a Super Genesis version of it. And they were different games, too. I think one was more of a fighting game. The other was kind of like a side-scrollery game. And you could play the 3 main characters.
Right, because the Genesis one, if I remember correctly, was inadvertently a prototype for what eventually became the Aladdin Genesis game, which is much more culturally respected and liked.
Now, all right. I don't know anything about the Aladdin game. So do you know enough about it to go into it after that comment? If not, I'll let it go.
1991 is, in a way, I'm glad you chose this one because it is really the end of an era in some respects, because soon after this, we have the blood of 90s cartoons, and they're in a very different place. The 2 big threads of 90s cartoons are much more continuity heavy superhero cartoons, your Batman animated series, your X-Men, your Spider-Man, blah, blah. And also the Disney cartoons explode in the 90s. And
are you referring to Tailspin?
I'm referring to Tailspin, I'm referring to Aladdin, I'm referring to DuckTales, I'm referring to granted, this all started a bit in the 80s, but it really explodes in the 90s. There's Rescue Rangers, there's Darkwing Duck, Gone Before Its Time,
legendary.
Sadly. There's even not ones that aren't. There's a Lilo and Stitch cartoon. There's some stuff that were made specifically cartoons because Disney was making their first attempt into getting an actual network together, and so needed content real fast. But they started prototyping that by putting those shows out through syndication. And they're doing a very different style of Disney cartoon, and they found it worked really, really well. And so they, rather than going into toys, however, they put their energy and efforts into making good video games. And so there are a few video games from that era who, unlike traditional ethos, the tie-ins are actually really, really strong. Like the DuckTales NES game specifically was extremely well made, and in fact inspired Shovel Knight as an example in terms of mechanics.
Hmm.
The Aladdin game, the DuckTales game, there were a couple of others, like a couple of the Mickey Mouse games, were really, really strong. And that legacy of strong video games ultimately led to a collaboration with Squaresoft, which then led to what we now know as the Kingdom Hearts series. So
Something
Disney
I've still
made the
never
pivot.
played.
Yeah, it's an experience. I'll say that. I enjoyed it, but it's also a whole lot. So like this is the kind of the weird pivot point, because the 80s, the cartoons were designed to sell toys. The 90s, the cartoons became their own thing, but there were still a lot of spin-off things, and Disney realized that comic books and video games were going to be a stronger market than toys were. And they're one of the few major IP studios to recognize that cultural shift and take advantage of it.
Wow, that's fascinating. Love that. So that's why I think it was so fascinating that for a show that only lasted about really a year and had maybe 21 episodes, it managed to get those two different video games created from it a few years later, of
Mhm.
different types of video games at that. And it even generated a comic book series that came out for a while that
I
was
did not
supposed
know
to have been
about.
a shorter run comic series, but I think I got an additional couple, like another 2 or 3 issues than it was supposed to. And it even got a role playing game.
I had no clue about that.
Yeah, it was like the role playing game came out in '94. Is very limited run, and if I remember right, because I think I played it once, because I had a friend that owned it, and I think I played a monkey bird in the game.
Nice.
I don't remember anything else about it. I vaguely, even barely remember it because we played it once, and
Right.
then he moved to a different town.
So my understanding, again, I've not seen the show, my understanding of Pirates of Dark Water is that this is a cultural point where for the 80s it was, we want to do toys, so we have to have a spin-off cartoon, and then maybe get a spin-off comic book and a couple other things. But the main thing is toys and cartoon. This is at a point where I think companies are trying to do franchises. We're going to do a franchise comes with a whole lot of stuff. I know this somewhat because uh let's because of Doctor Who, because it's this fucking show, right? Our podcast. There was an attempt at Doctor Who cartoon about the same time period, because as we've talked about in our run, the BBC had just canceled the live action Doctor Who, but still wanted to make money out of it. And so they had approached this Canadian company. I forgot the name of it. But anyway, one of the things that I read in the interviews about how this cartoon failed was, they said, okay, we can do this, but in 1990, 1991, we also need to have a toy line, a video game. They had to have a whole suite of things planned, and so they could not move ahead with the cartoon until they had locked in a deal with a toy company. And because most toy companies were American at the time, they had to explain to an American company how Doctor Who worked. And so the toy company kept coming back with changes that the BBC were deeply uncomfortable with, but the toy company said would sell, because they had to get like action figures and toy sets and vehicles. And so like requests like Doctor Who had to have like multiple companions, and House had to have, the Master was an explicit villain that had his own look and vehicles and whatnot. And it gets increasingly weird. Um,
Well,
so this
you
would have been
say
the
that,
same
but
time.
on some parts, though, that is already in the Doctor Who model, because the
It
Doctor has
is.
had a TARDIS crew before. The Master has his own TARDIS. The Master has had one or two other random vehicles. He may not have fully been attached to them. Then it also makes me wonder if the Time Lord role playing game that came out in the '90s was partially because of that toyetic move that you're discussing now.
Right. It was part of the. Unlike Dark Water, which sounds like the cartoon was the primary elements and everything built around that. Doctor Who was the opposite. It was like, we already have an existing TV show. The reruns are still doing well in the American market, so we're going to try to do different things off of that as the basis. And the cartoon was one vibe of that. I'm looking through. I actually have an issue. There's a fantastic fan magazine called Vorp, which is very specifically a magazine about Doctor Who comics and cartoons. Well, comics, but this one issue was specifically also about the cartoon. They put out like an issue a year, but it's a fantastic comic or magazine. I'm trying to find the article in question because they did a really good job of getting like old production paperwork and memos and it's a really good investigative journalism into a show that never actually happens, which is wild. Like they have like a whole bunch of the storyboards, for example.
Hmm.
And so he had to have a companion named Raven, who was part of a post-apocalyptic world. Um, the Master, one of the production stills has the Master, who looks a lot like Roger Delgado, except for he's bald. He has a cybernetic arm. He has a robot bird, and he has a dark-haired female companion who looks a lot like the Baroness from GI Joe. Uh, at one point in time, the Cybermen have a giant mech suit Cyberman version. So like you're right, like the DNA is there, and you can see how a toy company would stretch to that.
Yeah,
But you can also see how British executives in the late 80s or 90s have been like, I don't know. So
that already
um,
kind of hated Doctor Who at that point in time.
right. So I bring all that up. So like I feel like that's the kind of zeitgeist we're looking at with Hanna Barbera, going, okay, if we want to do this, we can't just put a cartoon out. That's not how this is done anymore. He-Man started the arc of, oh, we can kind of tie these things together. Now we're 10 years later, and it's okay, it has to. So they probably had the deal for like the video games and the comic books and the role playing game before they were completely done with the cartoon, if I had to guess.
I'm pretty sure that you're right because the all right. So the idea itself came from the Hanna Barbera president and CEO David Kirshner at the time. It's based on a childhood idea he had from the works of Robert Louis Stevenson and some other pictures he'd seen. And I have a vague recollection actually that he'd either talked to Lucas or Spielberg about something too, and they gave him some additional influences. And so that's why it was his idea since childhood why
Wow.
it happened. And like the original thing was a 5 episode miniseries that was the most expensive project they'd ever made up to that
Wow.
point in time. Because
Wow.
President, my idea, we're going to put everything into it. So much so that each half-hour episode cost about $500,000.
Wow.
Like it is so much money was put in those first 5 episodes to make it a thing, and it had over like 12,000 cells, double the general number of Saturday morning cartoon. Like it was all there on the screen for you as a kid. And watching it now and having now seen heavy metal, the animation between this and heavy metal
Yeah.
seemed very similar to each other from like the fluidity, the motions and everything else. I could see it. I couldn't stop thinking heavy metal the entire time I was watching this.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's. I hadn't made the connection to heavy metal, but I was the whole time I was going, "Why does this animation style look familiar?" As soon as you say that, it's like, "Oh, that's why." You're right because it felt like they were making an animated movie, right?
Yeah.
So there's certainly a high quality there, and like I mentioned with He-Man, like the voice acting also it's Hanna Barbera. They have a strong cast of really talented voice actors, so the voice acting is also really strong. So like, if you had told me this was just if you could probably take those 5 episodes, edit them together into a movie, and just release it as a feature animated film in '92, I would completely believe that.
Yeah. And so what they did though, since it was so successful, they took those 5 episodes and they tacked them onto the start of season one and they made some tweaks here and there to
Mhm.
turn into the rest of the series. And you can tell. But we're not there yet.
Yeah.
Originally, they had Roddy McDowall as a voice of Niddler for them when they first originally made it.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Like, for those of you
Wow.
that are curious, who Roddy McDowall would be, If you go back and watch Planet of the Apes, you'll get a point of reference for him. I think that's
Right.
one of the bigger ones. Or if you go back and watch the first Fright Night, you'll know exactly who he is.
Yes.
But
As
sorry, you're saying.
I was just a surprise. I had no idea he was on, especially Niddler of all things.
But when it came time they wanted to make to a series, he asked for more money, and they went, no.
Especially if it's costing 500,000 a pop just to animate the damn thing.
And instead, they went with an Eddy favorite to replace him with for Niddler.
Is it Frank Welker?
It is Frank Volker. Did you recognize Frank's voice as Niddler?
When we got to episode 6, I was like, "There's a bit of Scooby Doo in this." And I was like, "Is this Frank?" I didn't look it up because I didn't want to know. But when you've heard Frank's Scooby Doo, occasionally it does creep up in other voices he does.
Yeah. All right. That's an interesting question. Since you've watched so many animated series and you're really familiar with the voice actors in most of them, is it distracting for you when you're watching a series that you may not have seen before to start recognizing bits and pieces of their voices? Like, do you spend more time thinking if you know this person, if you're picking up snippets?
Uh, yes and no. It is distracting, but sometimes I find that to be a feature. A good example actually is uh, I watched Gundam Wing. I had never watched any Gundams, and everyone's telling me don't watch Gundam Wing. It's terrible, and so of course I have to watch Gundam Wing now. Um, but partially I watched it because it was the first Gundam to be imported into the U.S. and so it was localized with voice actors from the time. And a lot of the voice actors who worked on Transformers Beast Wars ended up working on Gundam Wing because it was the same localization studio. And so one of the characters, Scott McNeil plays a lot of characters in both, but one of the characters in Gundam Wing sounds a lot like because he has a New York accent and he has the same New York accent that Rat Trap does in Beast Wars, and so it
Hmm.
sounds a lot of times like it's Rat Trap is piloting a giant robot. So I was like, okay, that's funny to me. Um, and so like the first couple of episodes, I was like, that's Rat Trap, but it's a boy fighting as a child soldier in a war. But over time, I end up just enjoying it because like I know these are voice actors I enjoy, so I'm probably going to enjoy the work on this. And Gundam Wing, as we talked about when we recorded it, is definitely a very flawed cartoon. But I ended up enjoying the voice work partially because I did recognize the voice actors. So for me, I actually do find it ultimately to be a feature. Um, but part of it is also because of my hearing loss, I do have to pay more closer attention to the way that people talk. And so as a result, I end up finding I do recognize voice, even if I don't know who they are. I do go, that voice actor sounds familiar a little bit because I do pay attention to the cadence and structure because I have to as a result of my hearing loss. So I think that's part of the reason why, like, if you like actors, I see someone's face go, I've seen that face before. I have no idea from where. I'm bad at recognizing live action actors, but voice actors I'm pretty good at because I have to pay attention to the voice. And sometimes I'll be watching. It's happened recently. My wife's in Downton Abbey, and we were watching the. She got through the whole series and is watching the movies now. And one of the movies, one of the minor characters in the second to last Downton Abbey movie, turns out he plays the master in one of the Big Finish audios. And suddenly I was like, is that McQueen? Oh my god, yeah, it's the McQueen Master, and it's like I thought it was hysterical. I love the movie as well because like I know that actor, but only until he opened his mouth, I had no clue who it was. And he opened his mouth, I'm like, oh man, I know that guy.
So I take it that you all are going to go see the last Downton Abbey movie, supposedly the last Downton Abbey movie that's coming out soon.
Michelle's planning to, yes. Luckily, they conveniently killed off the characters of the actors who have also died, so I think that'll probably work out pretty well.
Hmm. Not because we've also seen all the Downton Abbey stuff, and we're debating if we want to go see it.
Right. It is new and novel to Michelle. I've watched bits and pieces of it. I've not watched it all the way through. It's snippets here and there, but it seems like a nice show.
I will save my thoughts until we do the Downton Abbey cast.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Because we watched it as it came out on, I think, was it PBS at the time or Netflix? I don't remember. I was going to make another PBS joke, but I think it was on Netflix. Damn it. All right. So McDowell out because they wouldn't pay a salary. So instead they got Frank Walker, which still a great deal, probably in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. The comic book series came out in 91 from Marvel. It was supposed to have been a 6-series run, but instead it went out to like 9 issues.
Wow.
show that it was just, but they added like more back history and story onto it, is what the additional issues were. So
Huh.
it's, look at one person, this is my idea, but I'm head of a company. All this is going to happen because I will it into existence. Like, that is the kind of support I would love a project of mine to have from
Yeah,
somebody to
seriously.
make all that happen. And the reason is actually in the series is that it came out with a toy line. They had a bunch of toys. They even made Tula, because I like to keep pointing out
Oh.
how there weren't necessarily a lot of female characters made, but Tula was one of the ones that was made for those. Even in the video game, if you played the Punch 'Em Up, they had all three main characters. They didn't have
Oh, okay.
Niddler, but they had like Ren, Tula, and Izao, or whatever his name is.
Ayaz.
Yes. So there's a level of progressiveness that's there for the 90s to have done that.
Right, because again, like, if you look forward to the next wave of style of cartoons that are become prevalent, um, many of the superhero cartoons did have women in prominent roles, although they still numbered fewer than the male counterparts. Many of the Disney shows also had female characters in various roles. So, like, the role of women is something more than just a person to be captured has evolved over the 10 years. But I mean, we saw bits of that, like even in Thundercats, right?
Yeah.
Um, so like it was something. It wasn't like it's 91. Now we have to suddenly introduce women. It was something that was evolving over that time period as they realized again. Weirdly, He-Man recognized girls are buying these toys, but then the cartoons are realizing, oh, we can actually feature them, and that won't alienate our audience.
And well, I say that, but at the same time, it spikes up and then it immediately goes back down. So it's a constant like up and down thing they're playing with. Is there anything else you would specifically like to know about this show before we actually get into the series itself? Because I've got a bunch of random facts screwing all about.
Um, so do you know anything about why the hard shifts during between I assume it's episode 5, but for our purposes, between episode 4 and episode 6, there's a pretty hard shift in quality and style of writing?
Okay. So you may have noticed, but this is one of the few shows in the 90s that showed them actually killing people, just like
Right.
dead.
Mhm.
And after the first 5 episodes, they decided to make the show less serious and to sort of take away from those darker tones that were there.
Okay.
And that's part of like the reason for the hard shift. Also, the first 5 episodes were the ones that were originally made as like the little mini series,
Right.
and then it becomes more of a television series. You'll even notice I'm going to point out something very specific, but there's a dip and change in how the animation is.
Yeah.
The scripts aren't quite as strong, and definitely things are starting to shift.
Okay. The other question I
But
have, I'll go ahead and finish that.
no, go ahead. You might ask what I'm about to say anyway.
Well, I was the other question I was gonna ask is why did the people who made the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo not sue?
Damn it, that's a joke I had later on in my notes about the episodes. Um, because Eddie, these are treasures, not ghosts.
Oh, okay, there you go. No, it has the exact same problem that I as soon as I watched the first episode, we'll get to more in the first episode, but like first episode, it's like we have explicit number of treasures to find. And I was like, that's the 13 Ghosts of Scooby Doo problem because like when you have a specific number, if it's popular, you have to keep pushing those last couple of things down the road.
Yeah, which is the problem they hit, because like regardless of how successful it was popular enough at the time that they were like, oh shit, we need to make sure they don't find all these treasures, and
Right,
that's when they made an active thing to start slowing it down for them finding the treasures.
right,
So the success of the show is going to lead to its imminent demise, because
right.
then it hit a point where the production team wasn't keeping up with the number of episodes and everything they need to make in a timely manner,
Oh,
and it
okay.
was conflicting with other shows. And so in the end, they canceled it. Like the last 4 episodes were finished and aired 6 months later than what it was supposed to be. So when I make the
Wow.
joke about the show ran for 1 year, it ran for 2 years just because the last 4 episodes took so long to air.
Fair enough. Okay.
And then it was replaced by SWAT cats, like the radical something police team of those cats.
Wasn't that a Japanese show that got imported, or was that American made?
I don't know enough about SWAT cats. SWAT cats, the Radical Squadron, is what it was called.
Scott, yeah. Um, uh, I think I'm thinking of Biker Mice from Mars. Um,
I
yeah,
don't know what that
because
is.
SWAT Cats is well. But the point is, like, there's the '90s is when they started realizing, hey, we could just import TV shows. And it's a hell of a lot cheaper. And so there's a lot of shows that like I had no clue were Japanese shows originally. Samurai Pizza Cats. That's the show I'm thinking of.
Mm.
That
That
was
sounds
apparently a
like an imported
Japanese
show.
show. Right. And it's definitely originally a Japanese show, and they're just like, I don't know, let's just rewrite the entire show to fit what the mouth flaps are on this thing. Um, but no, SWAT Cats apparently, I just double checked. It looks like it was an American made show. So
So yeah, it was their own success, wanting to slow down capturing the treasures, impact production, and that is what led to the show being canceled. But because it was so popular, this show, that it could have potentially kept going and become a whole thing,
right,
a
and
whole
then
franchise. Everything's there, the infrastructure, everything's laid out. Even after it's canceled, the parts they put in place hit years later.
right,
Fascinating.
wild.
Anything else before we jump into the episodes themselves proper?
Nope, let's dive in.
A young teenager named Ren learns he is the heir to the throne of Octopon when he rescues an old man from the sea. And the old man reveals he is his father, Primus, ruler of Octopon. When the cowardly monkey bird Niddler kidnaps Ren and takes him to the evil Bloth, captain of the most feared ship, the Maelstrom. Ren becomes Bloth's enemy, and he sets out to hire a crew as Ren sets off on a quest to find the 13th treasures of rule.
Yeah, it's a strong start. I mean,
Yes.
it's a lot of fantasy tropes. It's like, the son who has a secret heritage turns out he's actually secretly a prince, and his dad dies to give him a plot convenient mission. I mean, but I'm not mad because it's using the tropes. It's a fantasy show, and it's using
Yeah.
fantasy tropes to tell fantasy stories. Like, getting mad at tropes for telling a story it's supposed to tell is dumb. So I'm not mad at all about that.
And it's aimed at kids. So the big
Right.
thing is these are a bunch of tropes that we may have gotten tired of, but at 12, we'll say 11 to 15, they aren't necessarily tropes that you've seen ad nauseum throughout your life.
Yeah.
And it
Mhm.
speeds it up for it to get you hooked immediately.
Right.
I'm going to start. The show for me is already on a bad foot, though,
Okay.
because there's no theme song, Eddie. Where's my fucking theme song? Did we hit the
There's
90s and we say that theme songs are unimportant?
there's a kind of piratical vague music in the background.
They're telling you like what the series is about, and they put a little music behind it. So that I've made a point of commenting on every single theme
Yep,
song at the start
that's
of
fair.
these. And so that shift from the 80s to the 90s was pretty harsh watching this run. Because I keep thinking to
Which
myself, He-Man.
which is interesting because X-Men 94 also doesn't have lyrics, but that theme is more iconic. But I think it's a case of they put effort and energy into making that theme song, whereas this just feels like f- find vague pirate music
Yeah.
on Spotify, and it sounds like that.
It would have even been better if they had like a sea shanty that just tell you the lyric, tell you what the
Right,
show's about.
right, or like just a little bit of a vibe or flair, some kind of something that says fantasy in it, or like, just a little, maybe a little bit of rock music somewhere in there, just something to give it a little bit of an edge, a difference. But no, it's just extremely generic pirate music.
And the start of the show, though, as I can tell you, as a young kid, Chris, who saw probably about, I think overall the show had 21 episodes. I
Mhm.
maybe saw 9 of them because they were
Okay,
never aired quite right.
no,
But to see a very dark skinned protagonist of the show, like young Chris, loved it. Like off the
yeah,
bat, boom. Because thinking about any of the shows we've watched now, have any of the other primary protagonists looked like Ren?
no. I mean, and again, like, there, I could see the connections to Aladdin to a degree, right? It's the,
Yeah.
here's a this is not as, I mean, Aladdin's obviously drawing from very different cultural basis, but there is a bit of Middle Eastern vibe in this whole show, you know?
Yes.
Like, it's not just West Country, European pirates. They have pirates of different cultures, all kind of thrown into this fantasy world. So, like, yeah, you're right. Like having a darker skinned protagonist is not weird, given the concepts we're given, because it's drawing from a rich tradition of all sorts of different kinds of seafaring stories, adventure stories.
And much like I did for He-Man, I put my journalist hat to focus somewhat on characters, but I'm still focused here on the plot because this is the 90s and there is a cohesive plot that goes throughout the first at least 5 episodes. We're only
Mhm.
covering 2 of those 5, but it's like there. The plot moves. I'm not going to talk about it yet, but the plot is.
Right. I will say it reminded me a bit of Thundercats in the sense of it's very clear there's strong continuity between the episodes, but each episode's relatively self-contained. I do think that the first episode hurts as a result of it because they have to get from Ren has learned his secret history, meets Niddler. I keep saying Niddler, and also gets the first treasure all in 22 minutes.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing feels really. Oh, and you also have to introduce Bloth too. So like it's all really rushed.
Since we're at Bloth, and I've commented specifically how I love the fact that as a kid I saw a dark-skinned protagonist jumped out at me.
Mhm.
Now, as an adult, and from a journalist perspective, it is distressing that pretty much all the voice actors, I think, are white,
Mhm.
except for one guy I know of.
Who's that? The guy who played Bloth?
Yes.
I just somehow knew that was going to be the case.
Yeah. Because I want to say it was even like George Newmar, I think, is a voice of the guy who plays Ren, who also is one of the people that voiced Superman. He's done some other stuff, and he's
Okay. Right.
mildly famous. But
Yeah.
irritated as an adult. As a kid, didn't really hit me as that, but it's a whole
Okay.
thing.
Um, I have to say, Niddler is the probably the last talking animal silly companion trope that we're going to see. Because again, cartoons are going to change pretty fundamentally after this point in time. So like that trope doesn't really come back in any meaningful way.
Yeah.
Um, and he's not bad, all things considered. Like the monkey bird is kind of he's the annoying comic relief. Or not, I keep saying annoying. I'm using annoying in the sense of a trope, not necessarily who he actually is. So I should probably clarify saying he's meant to be the comic relief character. But unlike Orko, he has actual proper missing knowledge, secret knowledge, and generally does a good job of filling that role. But he's not a fighter, and so
Yeah,
like
but he's competent in what he can do, which is a
right,
contrast to Orko specifically, and
right,
it's
exactly.
well balanced.
It reminds me more of someone like Snarf in the sense of course, this guy's not going to get into a fight. So the fact he's a coward doesn't seem like a flaw so much as a logical extrapolation of the situation they're in being dangerous.
Yeah, and the fact that Niddler is able to pick up at least one person consistently and fly them wherever they want to go throughout the course of the show adds an amount of versatility and usefulness to the character that makes you overlook occasional bits of cowardice and constant complaining about food. Like
Right,
that is how you write it.
right. Yes, I admit the gag of him being always hungry does wear thin by the time we're done with this run.
Yeah.
But that's really the biggest complaint I can make about Niddler as a character. So I was genuinely surprised because like I know where this is going. We've seen a lot of variety of how this character is handled, and by the end of at least episode one, it's like Niddler, okay. In fact, Niddler was quote unquote a villain at the start of the show.
Yeah. So then it becomes a matter of are there any actual good people in the show if we're specifically talking about pirates? I'm gonna leave that question for the moment so we can come back to it at the end. But
Right.
older question. He even has Ren has the Aragorn sword, Eddie. It's broken. It's part of his
Right.
legacy that he has to reforge.
Yeah. Something we talked about in He Man was the sense that a lot of people writing these scripts are probably inspired by Tolkien.
I'm just astonished by the consistency that since we're watching it, how it continues to go through that.
Hmm. Right. Although the compass also does seem like it's borrowing at least somewhat from Thundercats.
Yeah. Essentially the sight beyond sight.
Right.
It's kind of how Silverhawks do, kind of how Mask does.
Right. Also, oh, did Thunder catch Steel from Mask? Oh my god, that's a terrible thought.
Look at that. I'm just saying.
Right.
Momo Mask built the framework for people to see things, Eddie.
See, if only we'd all fall T-Bob.
Okay, as you're saying though, so they get together. He meets his whole crew here, and the crew steals a ship to end the episode with for them to go off and journey with.
Right. So this leads to an interesting larger discussion, which certainly the popularity of One Piece has drawn into question more recently. Although One Piece actually, as a manga, probably started not soon after this, right? So I think there's some
Hmm.
cultural thing going on. But like the idea of pirate on one hand has become shorthand for naval adventurer, but on the other hand, even the quote unquote heroic pirates are also on some level criminals.
Yeah, and we're not
And
Robin Hood criminals either. We're just criminals.
right. And so you get into the interesting American idea of criminal as hero, and how because American media tends to be a common import to other countries, therefore that concept starts to slowly bleed into other cultural approaches as well. Because it all goes back to like Bonnie and Clyde and how people even before Al Capone got sent away, like people, Al Capone did horrible stuff, but still he was uh, uh, beloved by a lot of people in Chicago, right? Because there's this weird American obsession with making the criminals into objects of worship.
Yeah.
So that ties into the pirate ethos on some level too. But also that goes back to Treasure Islands and other, even Treasure Island. Right? If you look at the original novel, it's all about how pirates are actually really horrible, and the myth of the pirates doesn't stand up to the actual reality of being a pirate. That's the whole point of Treasure Island is like you get swept up in the myth and then you meet actual pirates and it turns out they're horrible people. That's kind of the major thread of Treasure Island. Um, but then this idea of, well, we're slightly less bad pirates because we're doing it for good reasons because we ultimately want to preserve and reenact these good things, but at a base level, it is about a guy who found out he's king and commits a series of crimes to steal things to reinforce his uh, believed to be legitimate rule, which is deeply uncomfortable.
And for my musical theater people out there, this I think falls more in the model of the Pirates of Penzance,
Okay,
where they're all pirates who are stealing stuff, but they're nice stealing pirates, so much so that if they capture crew and the crew says they're orphans, they let all the crew go.
right.
Which, as you'll never watch it, you find out secretly they're also all like noble people. No, it's a whole thing. So this is kind of almost in that model, at least for Rin as their leader.
Scarlet Pimpernel style stuff too. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's an interesting conceit, and I still like the start of it because I love the sword and sorcery pirate fantasy world they drop you into immediately. Like there's no question at all. We're in a different world. Here we go. Here's our start with it, and it throws you into it.
It certainly, from a sword and sorcery perspective, I can see that because magic is never portrayed as a force you want to have a lot of truck with, right? Every time magic gets involved, it seems like it goes bad for something. Like the whole world is controlled by dark water. Something bad happened in the past, and now all of the water is turned into where this dark water is, and that becomes an ongoing thread. And we have these treasures, but all the treasures have something weird with them. So like it certainly has that sword and sorcery thing of like magic is not to be entirely trusted.
All right. Next episode.
Yep.
Tula and Ayaz, whatever, are piloting the boat, bantering about the treasures in the compass with Rin and Lit, while Rin and Niddler are exploring and are then captured by Bloth's goons. Bloth's second is trying to train dragons. Rin meets Abagon, one of his father's most trusted captains, in the bowels of the Maelstrom, and learns the history behind the treasures of rule. Abagon tells him of one way out, the sewer. I want to pause a minute, Eddie. There's a
Yep.
sewer in the bottom of a big infinite-sized ship. I just want to.
Yep.
One of the prisoners sells out Ren before they enter the sewers. They overhear Bloth learning that Ayaz and Tula have the compass in the first treasure. Ren has a second treasure. Then Tula arrives, giving Bloth the first treasure. End of episode. Dun, 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 dun.
This is one of the rare times where how we do our podcasts was at detriment, because clearly a lot of stuff happened between episodes, and I was kind of struggling to keep up a little bit during this whole episode. It kind of assumed you watched the previous episodes, which normally for these runs, I expect a certain amount of that, and I can prepare for that, but I was expecting this to be relatively compartmentalized, like all of the other shows we've done. And this is like, no, we're again, early 90s cartoon. We're moving ahead. Just keep up. And so I was like, okay, I guess I gotta keep up now.
So was I. So much so that one of my comments actually for the first episode is that the plot feels choppy. And that's because it doesn't stop. Things just are moving at such an accelerated pace, and they're using a lot of shorthand as if they have potentially. I think the first 5 episodes could have been like a 10 episode thing. So it has the opposite problem of the old Marvel shows. But what that means is they're like truncating everything. The fact in the first episode, he does all that stuff, meets the pirate crew in less than like 2 minutes, and they seal a boat together to go on a deadly mission.
Right.
And since then, at moving at that pace, all sorts of shit's happened that I did not watch episodes 2 and 3 because I was going to do that.
Right, neither did I.
And you can tell that here because they think that Ren is dead, which we don't know if you how we jumped in.
Right.
But it comes out through the course of the episode. So there's a lot of that, and the plot's very choppy and too accelerated. I think, if anything, it should have even slowed the plot down maybe 20% for kids to watch it.
Right, and it's interesting watching this right after watching He-Man, because there's still a general arc here, right? Which is that there Ren and Niddler have to try to escape the ship. It's just like there's actually, this is the episode's plot. So they have an episode plot, but the episode's called Betrayal, and the actual betrayal of the episode happens literally in the last 10 seconds of the episode, which is the cliffhanger. And that's fine, but you spent the whole episode waiting for me to expect the thing doesn't happen till the very end.
Yeah.
And it's the whole thing is like, you're right. It's there's a lot of television writing has A plots, B plots, sometimes C plots if it's an hour-long episode. And so it should be the A plot is this episode's plot, and B plot is the thing that goes through it. That's not quite what's happening here. Is both plots are given equal priority throughout the writing of this. And so the plot that you can follow along if you're watching this episode is constantly shifting with the plot that you haven't been following. You have no idea what's going on. And so the whole thing feels muddy as a result.
100% agree. And I couldn't get past the Maelstrom. Watching it now.
The TARDIS?
Yes. It doesn't make any sense to me in my brain. Even now, I'm trying to like put some sort of confinement to it because it is infinitely small, but also infinitely small.
So, like you said, I was trying to approach this in the, okay, again, just I just watched He-Man, started watching this, and said, okay, I need to focus on individual episodes. And so I'm like, okay, so of course they're in the sewers because they want to do a story in the sewers. But because there's so much plot going on, I kept thinking, is this ship so big that it has its own separate sewer system? Which then implies lots of other infrastructure that the show is in no way, shape, or form prepared to explain to me about how the Maelstrom works. Like, is this functionally a floating city? Which would be fucking cool if that's the case, right?
It has to be, but then when you look at it from how it's drawn, you see the ship
not.
proper, it looks like it'd be a little bit, it's big enough to like, I take that back. So generally when you look at it, 80% of the time, it is a standard size ship, maybe a little bigger. In this episode where they talk about how they left Octopon to go out, it's large enough to swallow 3 ships easily.
Right.
but that size is inconsistent. So it's
Right. And if it's because it's a magic ship or whatever, that's fine. But like, no, it feels like they made that ship big just because they wanted to have cool sewer scenes. Right. And that's where I'm starting to get a little concerned because I don't feel like this show is nearly as organized as it wants me to believe it is.
correct. Because we learned throughout the course of it that these people were captured 17 years ago.
Right.
So they've been on this ship for 17 years. That means they've been in that
Right.
sewer system for 17 years, fighting for their own infrastructure, which in of itself is weird.
Right.
But then how are they constantly being fed? And so I've got so many questions now the show is generating while it's trying to look cool with its heavy metal animation. And Bloth is a horrible captain. There's no way he would still be captain because he kills his crew at whim. If he captures people to turn them into crew members, they would obviously kill him. No one would want to make a deal with him because you can't trust him to make a deal with. Like,
Right.
evil for the sake of evil doesn't work because then everyone's going to turn against you and you have no resources in the end of the day.
Right. And then all of that is in my head. Well, the much larger and obvious problem that hangs over this entire episode is how in the fuck does Bloth not recognize the monkey bird that betrayed him 3 episodes previously because they have mud on their face? Right? With He-Man, I was fine with it because Skeletor was painted to be bad at his job, and that was the joke. Bloth's supposed to be terrifying, and he's unable to recognize the monkey bird that betrayed him and the guy he's been chasing for 3 episodes to get treasures from because they're painted brown for this episode.
I let that go because he seemed to be more focused and distracted on training the dragons, and he had a lieutenant, like a tertiary character bothering him. So that's why I let that part go. It's like, what do you want, Minnie? Oh, yeah, whatever. And that was it.
Sure, but like because of the weirdness of how it's shot, like I'm how it's drawn,
Yeah.
they had to both be in the more or less in the same room, and the way it was written, he was about maybe a foot away.
Yeah. It goes back to the infinitely large and now infinitely small ship.
Right. If it had been a case of like there's this giant ship and someone said, "Hey, there's a report of a guy with a broken sword and a monkey bird," and he's like, "Yeah, whatever, I don't care. I got dragon shit to do," that would have been fine. But like, and at one point in time, early on in the episode, they're drawn in shadows, so you can't quite make them out, which is again fine. But when they stop doing that, is also seeing where Bloth is in the same room as them, and I'm like, "Now wait a minute."
Or if they'd put more monkey birds into the series, so then you would think monkey birds are a common occurrence.
Right. If they're like 5 other monkey bird crew members, and they're going, I can't remember every monkey bird that's betrayed me. There's so many, right? It's like, sure, great, and some kid with a broken sword. Okay, they're a dime a dozen. Like a couple of lines could solve this problem. Like a slight redrawing of scene. It's an own goal that made me nervous. And then when the sewer stuff started coming in, it's like, okay, this whole concept starting to fall apart, and we're 4 episodes in.
And we skipped 2 episodes, so there's no dealing with our infrastructural problems or more. And so, all right, I want to focus on in the belly of the ship fight. We've got what's her name, Abaddon fighting against other people. Ren sees injustice as a hero would and runs to throw her his broken sword that he needs for like his father's legacy.
Yeah.
I understand his shorthand, but that makes no sense for that character to do if I'm on this visit quest. It's my link to my father.
Right. I mean, weirdly, I was, to be fair, I was more receptive of that, but also partially because it was just so novel to see an older woman be portrayed as a badass in these kinds of cartoons.
Yeah.
Because, she's, the whole scene is that she knows Ren's father. That's kind of the whole vibe of what's going on here. But they show her, like, with long white hair. So it's like, no, she's meant to be older, but she's extremely fit and clearly capable of taking care of herself. And I was like, that's just so refreshing to see that when I saw that scene, I kind of let it watch over it. But it was very much after the episode's over, I was like, no, wait a minute. Because the whole point of this is I need to know about my father. I need just to prove that. So why would I throw that away Right. Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't make sense, but in the moment, I was just like, "But it's so cool to see this," you know?
Yeah, and she's been the ruler obviously for 17 years
Yeah.
since Primus died, which is awesome. But they handle things by fistfights. That's what we establish. Because if you go and look at their city looked like this big high tech city, like sci-fi fantasy city.
Yeah.
Not so sci-fi fantasy, not like fantasy.
And that was something else that was bugging me about this show is because, like, so many of the other shows have been science fantasy, and so at first I was thinking, "Okay, this is gonna be another science fantasy thing," 'cause we've been watching, and then after the first episode, I was like, "Oh, no, it's just fantasy." And then this episode happens, like, "Is it science fantasy?" Right, the tone is starting to get a little wobbly in terms of what is this show actually trying to be. Like, if it's just a fantasy show that has weird spikes of technology, that I guess that's fine, but you need to explain that at least a little bit.
So yeah, it's I'm getting a lot to these little things coming up, but I love the world itself, but not necessarily how I'm seeing everything executed. Because even
Yeah,
specifically when we get to the bar scene with like Tula and everything else, and she picks up the gun, like the bio gun that has like a little lizard inside of it that's going to be a
yeah,
sleep gun. Love it so much. Like
yeah.
my designer creative brain, it would do this and this. That is brilliant.
No, it's it's getting a lot on just being cool. Don't get me wrong. But certainly it was harder for me to turn my analytical brain off because there are so many little things that are just piling up in my head.
Yeah, I get that. But and the maelstrom is too fucking big. Like it needs to
Yeah,
be more confined. If you want it to be a city, it should be like they should have called it. You know what? Like two lines of thing, like my city boat or something, or
right.
some sort of capstone like that. Then you would understand how massive
Mhm.
it is.
Right.
And they should have only ever shown it from the front or like a little piece from the side, not the whole thing. Like bloop.
Right, because as soon as you see the whole thing, you start to invoke scale.
Before we move on to the next episode, Eddie, I watched episode 5 for us because I felt that I should have to.
Okay. I'm vaguely
So
curious how that betrayal thing went. I'm assuming it was part of an elaborate plan.
it was not part of any plan that Ayaz and his friend were aware of, or Ren. But since the ship is so vastly large and small at once, Ren was in the bottom of the sewer to overhear Tula talking to Teron, the
Uh-huh.
ecomancer, who is from Tula's plate where Tula lived, because she wanted to trade all that to free him so he could come and stop the Dark Order from destroying her city. And
Okay.
Teron tells Tila that her city's already gone and she's a fool who should have helped Ren because he can only slow the problem. Ren can cure the problem.
So she was actually genuinely sincerely gonna betray him until she was told basically don't bother.
Yes.
Oh my
And
god.
Ren doesn't care because it's an animated series and so they're friends now.
Because honestly, I really thought it was the oh no, she said she's gonna give him the treasure, but it's all part of the plan to rescue Ren. I think that's how these shows normally would go. But no,
Nope.
I absolutely was gonna sell you out completely.
But the thing we need to remember though is that Ayaz and Tula believe Ren and Niddler were both dead. So she was going to trade
Mm,
those to get the Ecomancer back to save her village, essentially her island.
okay, that makes a little more sense. Um, but still, I mean, the whole that actually just tells me more kind of what I've been suspecting is that this whole thing feels like it's punching above its weight a bit, right? It's trying to be this huge, massive, sweeping fantasy epic, and it's like good for the ambition, but mate, you're a cartoon selling video games and toys.
what it's what it's telling me is that since it was the idea of like the president and it was his, he probably had a lot of creative control over it and
Right,
essentially stopped other people from saying, well, maybe we should do this or to help it do this and this. And he's
right,
like, nope, my childhood idea, this is what it should be, these are where the
right.
characters are, and this is where it goes.
Yeah. No, now that you say that, there's a lot of frustrated novelist vibes around these couple of episodes.
Wow. So I watched it. That's what happens in episode 5.
Okay.
Any other questions before we move on to episode 6?
No, let's move on because I have thoughts.
After rescuing Tyron from the maelstrom, Rin and crew stop to gather supplies, but are interrupted by Bloth and his men. During the pursuit, they wind up in Adranos, where it is revealed that Tula is an ecomancer, and they find the place in ruins. Tyron and Tula try to use their powers to restore the island, but something evil is around and guarding one of the treasures. It drains Tula of her life force, but instantly Tyron is able to restore it. Tyron admits to being one of his father's former captains and sends Rin alone into the pit.
So, the idea that 7 of the treasures are kept by 7 of his father's former captains, I generally like the idea, and because he has no clue who his father's captains were, because his
Yeah.
dad conveniently died. It's like you're gonna keep running into these captains, and you're always gonna have slightly different relationships, and um, so like that concept I like, and so Terran suddenly turning out to be one of the captains didn't really bother me, but Tula episode 6, like halfway through the show, and suddenly the female character has to have magic powers, feels very Chitara to me in a way that I am not okay with.
I had less concerns about her having magical powers because Rin is like supposedly our lead. It's more of definitely a team show, which is a change from some of the other shows we watched.
Mm.
But essentially uses magical items. Ayaz is just really strong, and Tula is sort of a thiefy character, so it would add on to her thiefy skill set. But the thing
Sure.
is, I don't think it shows up that often, really.
No, it feels like, oh, hey, this Ecomancer thing's really cool. We should make one of the characters an Ecomancer. It feels like something they discovered during the course of writing. And then it's like, it's like Taylor Ecomancer. It kind of bolted on afterwards. It doesn't feel like it's growing. Again, we're watching chunks of episodes, and this clearly is a very heavy continuity show. So there may have been an episode that covered this, but it does feel like it comes out of nowhere.
And I think that's part of the shift, though, from episode 5 to 6, where they're going to lighten the tone and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the thing could have been they could have given Tula that power, so then they could be able to like heal people and other stuff probably throughout the course of the show. So if we grievously wound one of our characters, Tula could call on energy to heal them, but can't heal them too much, or might overdrain her. So it gives you an easy out.
So that explains how people don't die anymore, is because Tila can fix them. That makes sense.
My biggest problem that punched me like a fucking rock in the face. I went with a punch and a rock at the same time. Is that Rin went from the super dark skinned character to a very light skinned character. Like, boom! It's like, what?
Yeah, I was gonna remark on the fact that Ren is suddenly white for no apparent reason.
He's not white. He's just
very close.
Really light skinned brown character.
Very close. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, it's that was. And the thing is, though, it doesn't work because they didn't make new credits either. So in the credits, he's like how he looks originally, and then show.
That was when I noticed the shift in quality. I was like, and my assessment was originally like maybe they went to a different studio or something for this episode, because that happened quite a bit in this time period. It was like they would have, if a show became popular or if a show was too expensive, they would often outsource episodes to multiple different studios at the same time. Batman the Animated Series did this a lot, but certainly also X-Men and Transformers and G.I. Joe, they all did this. So I thought, oh, a different studio picked up, and they just didn't get the memo of what color his skin was supposed to be. But then it happens again in episode 13. I'm like, okay, that's not good.
Yeah. So, and I'm not going to talk about it or how Ayala seems to be gray now more than anything else. What bothers me here, and I swiftly made a point when we talked about He-Man, how even though that plot was recycled with Skeletor being constantly the villain, it didn't feel stale. Right. Episode 6 and the Maelstrom always being everywhere they're at every single time already feels stale. And it's been recycled too much by episode 6 versus He-Man, 100 odd episodes, and it didn't feel like that.
Yeah, no, it's like, give me Skeletor's shitty OSHA violation plot over this again, because it was bonkers, but at least it was different. But in this one, it's like the world building was charming me more than the actual plots, right? Like, because like now
Yeah.
we're in this weird case of, because with the Egomancer, it's using language and imagery that's more evocative of modern day technologies. So it's like, okay, so this is more of a science fantasy show than I originally believed, but it's not nearly as strong as other shows. They're so like it has this idea of technology has been replaced with life on some level and magic. So like it's an interesting vibe,
Yeah.
but the problem is, yeah, it's okay. Every episode seems like it's going to be Ren stumbles across, now that we're spreading it out, either a treasure or a clue towards the next treasure. The maelstrom will suddenly appear there. They will get into some kind of scuffle, and then Ren and his crew will get away by the skin of their teeth, while the maelstrom is not that far behind them. Again.
Yes. Which infinitely large, infinitely small, but as fast as their small like schooner, as fast as their schooner. So it's there are too many things that are like conflicting and hitting me. While at the same time, I'm loving all the biotech. I love the fact that we have the Ecomancer, but even in like the series where they showed him, he needs a special soil, like a vampire, to be able to like recharge and use his powers.
I hadn't thought about that. You're right.
And little branches grow out of his body to go into the soil to then go back in when he gets up, like he's recharged like a battery. And I, as soon as I saw the soil, I was like, "This is a fucking vampire."
Right. It's interesting. It's an interesting fusion of stuff. Again, like He-Man, but to your point, especially for Hanna-Barbera, it is surprisingly dull in terms of actual plot. Right? It's like, if this is a new studio, I would understand it, but like, no, these people should know better. They should be able to write better scripts than this. But now that you
And
told me the
I,
backstory, it feels like it's
uh,
the, oh, I can't. The boss wants this, so I guess we're doing it.
and I'm not familiar enough. I've not read Robert Louis Stevenson in a long time, so I'm not familiar. I don't remember enough of the story to know if like this is the pacing that was going out of the story, and they're trying to replicate that feel,
Mhm.
or what the directional choices were. Like there's some great shit here, but some of the choices and the execution of it come up lacking for what they're giving me, and I want it to be.
Right, right.
Anything else about this episode before we move on to the last
Nope.
one?
But let's wrap it up.
Episode 13, season 1, The Dark Dweller. While once again running from Bloth, the crew is forced to leave the Wraith, but Tula falls victim of the Dark Water in the process. Much like Abagon was swallowed early on episode 4, Ren is shaken and Bloth captures him. But a slight glimmer of hope comes when it seems Tula may still be alive. Ren then escapes and takes the treasures and enters the realm of the Dark Dweller to search for his lost friend, with Niddler by his side for comic relief.
Yep. So this episode, I really enjoyed it, but it made every episode previous to it worse for me.
How so?
Because until this episode, again, I've watched not a single frame. I know nothing about the backstory. I was like, okay, Pirates Dark Water is just kind of a weird conceit. And this episode comes like, no, the Dark Water is actually a big plot point. It's like, okay, cool. It's Pirates Water. We should talk about Dark Water. That makes sense. But then why the fuck you've waited this long to talk about it? It's
So they've referenced it. It could like this could be part of our how we do the format of the show interfering, because I'm willing to bet there's probably another episode or two in there where it came up
maybe.
more precisely, other than
Right.
saying like people afraid of Dark Water or they steer clear of it.
Right.
I don't know if they would tell you beforehand that it could potentially be sentient. Like that's a whole nother step.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it is it's a super cool concept. I genuinely had no clue. Right? It was like, oh, Dark Water sentient. That's interesting. And that raises all those questions of like, okay, so people have been sailing on you for a while now, and you've finally decided you've had enough of that, or at least this chunk of you decided enough of that. It raises some interesting concepts. Again, very sword and sorcery in the sense of anything involving magic ultimately is going to probably screw you. So, like,
Yeah.
again, the vibe very well. Um, but and again, Ren is a young, flawed leader, so he makes stupid decisions like, I'm gonna take all the treasures with me. And it's like, why, buddy? You're taking him right to the guy who needs the treasures. So maybe don't do that. But you're an idiot. So you're your kid. So that's okay on some level.
Yeah, because he's 17. Like that is what
Right.
that's what we know from this show's time and running.
Right.
The thing is,
Exactly.
though, all right. So dark water they've described as being in patches. So it's not everywhere, but it's consistent that it pop up and it's populous enough. And a ship that encounters it is usually destroyed. That's why I think one of the lines was like they saw the dark water. Like as long as it doesn't move, we're fine.
Right.
So
Okay.
it adds
Yeah.
to that sort of horror factor. I, in my head, have now retcanned that the Dark Dweller can essentially like jump from those pockets of dark water around the area,
That would make sense.
and they would
Yeah.
all lead to whatever its realm is. Kind of like how the Diamond of Disappearance teleported you there.
See, there you go. Let's see. It's all comes back
He-Man.
together. All comes back to He-Man.
The coffin though, the coffin bit, they get into a coffin to go under with Niddler. Utterly ridiculous, Eddie.
Yes. Yes. And not in a fun way, in a kind of what the hell's going on way.
That's like Indiana Jones in her fridge surviving a nuclear blast.
Right. Which turns out is not a thing you could actually do.
Indy said we could. If you take your science from James Bond, I'm surprised you're not taking your science from Indiana Jones too.
I don't take my science from James Bond. It's just I made a mistake once when I was young.
That's like James Bond math. I would say it was 2 or 3 times, but I get it. All right, I'll focus back in this episode instead of ribbing you about James Bond. They have 7 treasures by episode 13, Eddie. 7.
Yeah, 7.
That is phenomenal.
Right, because my guess is that they probably got 5 by episode 5. And then went, oh crap, we have to pace this out. And so they've gotten 2 more in the other 13 or the other 7 episodes, if I had to guess.
I would now imagine in season 2 they would have to lose some treasures if they had planned it to like keep extending it out. Which, as a kid, I'd be fucking frustrated watching that.
Right. See, I mean, I think the methodological step is Bloth gets access to some of the treasures. And so they have to start trading back and forth. It's like, I steal one from you, you steal one from me, which is right. It's going to be a zero-sum game that's just going to get frustrating. So yeah, it's the you pace this all wrong, and again, never should have given it a specific number, right? Just say the treasures of Darkwater.
Yeah.
And there's always another. Oh, hey, we found this ancient thing. It mentions a 14th treasure, and there's a 15th treasure, and this treasure is a one-time use thing. Like if you don't have a number on it, you can play that card as long as you need to. But no.
Rin skin tone is lighter in this episode than it was in episode 6.
I didn't notice that, but I'm not surprised.
A little bit more. It's just straight up gray. Like we've lost all concern about it.
Yep.
I don't have much else to say about it. You know what? I love that the Dark Dweller is a Satan-like figure, Eddie, that uses cunning and illusions to trick people to do shit. I hands down loved it. Loved that so much. Beautiful.
Yeah.
That I love. I give that nothing but kudos.
And also, I like the fact that Ren defeats a spirit of deceit by lying to him. Because he's like, yes, I have all 6 jewels. And then it's like, there's a 7th one. Boom, boom. I mean, it's just not a complicated plan. But for a kid watching it, it's actually pretty clever,
Yeah.
My frustration with watching this, my early comments of makes other shows bad is like, Ayaz goes, hey, we have 7 jewels. We can be so rich. And Ren's like, no, we have to use them to save the world. And Ayaz asked the question that should have been asked probably episode 2, which is how?
Yeah.
Where episode 13, it's like, oh, maybe we should explain what the treasures actually do.
Are you saying that? So, what do you feel about the fact the only reason they beat the Dark Dweller is they beat it with the power of friendship?
It's a late 80s or 90s cartoon. That's as long as I'm not putting morals at the end of the episode, that's fine.
You say late 80s, you say late 80s / 90s, but I raise you, my friend, that Guardians of the Galaxy 1, they beat Ronan the Accuser with the power of friendship.
I don't. Maybe I'm weird. I actually don't mind the power of friendship trope. Um, Partially because I think friendship as a concept is so devalued by modern society
Yeah.
that saying, "Hey, maybe friendship's really fucking cool," is something that I generally just am fine with and like to see more of. I know that My Little Pony has rammed that specific trope into the ground as a result, um, because it's so cheesily overemphasized. But like, I mean, a lot of Frodo managed to destroy the ring because of friendship. You know, what I mean, like it goes back a while.
Uh,
Gilgamesh survived because of the power of friendship. I mean, it goes back quite a while.
I know that technically Frodo drops the ring into like the lava pit, but Samwise is able to destroy the ring for the power friendship.
Okay, thank you for nitpicking while definitely sidestepping my actual point, which is that because he had a friend who was able to solve his fucking mission, Chris. I think you should put glasses on. I think you should push the glasses up on your nose when you explain that. I'd appreciate that.
Why, Eddie, if you
Thank you.
did not know.
But my point is, like, Sherlock Holmes, sometimes considers shit because of the power of friendship, right? It goes back quite a ways. This is not
Yeah.
a new trope, and I do generally like the trope, so that didn't bother me at all, frankly. Especially in a setting where literal magic is on the table. So, like, of course, they use the magic of friendship to defeat a guy who his power is causing discord and dissent amongst people. That makes perfect sense to me.
Cool. All right. What are your final thoughts on the entire series of the Pirates of Darkwater that we'll never come back and talk about again? May reference it.
I'm glad we watched Mask because this is not the worst show I've seen.
I did not shoot coffee out of my nose because I am now used to Eddie's timing.
um, no, I mean, I'm being slightly comedic here. It wasn't a bad show, but the problem is that uh, it was super unclear what it was trying to do. It became muddy very early on, and so when it went from extremely fast paced to extremely slow paced because they realized they had to extend out their storyline. It just the momentum that it had was already lost, and then it changed momentum again, and so I struggled to keep up. I mean, I was really at a point where Niddler was surprisingly the character I cared about the most by the end of these 4 episodes.
Nice.
How about you?
I'm in a I love the world around everything that we saw.
Mhm.
Like, I would love to create in that world because there's so many different stories you could tell and so many different things you could have done.
I can see why it
If
was a role playing game.
much like much how I felt about the Bond run, is that I would love to be following any other agent other than Bond to see what else is
Right.
going on. For Bond specifically, because then I know that agent could die or something else could happen.
Hmm.
So that's the problem with Bond that I was having.
Hmm.
From here, it is the story is too focused on them trying to like fix a dark water without any progress ever really going to happen for it,
Right.
which as an adult detracts me from it. As a kid, I would have been frustrated if I continued to watch it. But everything around that I love. I love like the dark water concept itself, the biotech that they have, the fact that they're ecomancers that are potentially psychics or magic, which adds another layer to it. They have mini dragon lizard things that they're using to like fly around and do things. You have a couple different species essentially, and you have different nations, how you would have in Conan and sword and sorcery stuff. So all those beautiful world pieces are there that makes me want to see more and engage with it. Now, having all those great things, what they did with it with the execution leaves me disappointed. Like, I
Hmm.
wouldn't recommend it to anybody. If you watch it, I'd say great. I'd talk to you with about it from what I've seen too, but I can't recommend it as a series.
Right. Right. Uh, um, I made a comment before, like I could feel frustrated novelist vibes, and like if someone like basically came to me and said, "Hey, I want to run a tabletop game using this world and more or less do the same plot, which is you're going to find 13 treasures over the course of the campaign," But the actual beats we're going to do differently. I would probably really be excited about that because there's a lot of interesting concepts here. There's like you said, it's very sword and sorcery, but yet in a kid friendly way, which is actually surprisingly well done from that perspective. Um, this core concept, I mean, we joke about put a number on it, you kill it, but I mean, the core concept of we're going to track down a bunch of different mystical treasures is a good, strong hook.
Yeah,
And
for
there's this
campaigns.
strange naval hazard that you have to navigate. I mean, it's like, there's all interesting kinds of terror. Even the core heroic crew isn't bad, right? Like, they're all
Yeah.
generally pretty good characters. Um, but you're right. Like, it's if this show had been done 5 years later and could really lean into the serialization, they probably could have done better. It's just off the cusp of a very specific style of making cartoons. It's pushed the envelope forward a little bit, but not quite enough. And the result, it fails on both ends. It's not quite episodic and goofy enough to be a traditional 80s cartoon. It's not quite serialized enough to be a strong 90s drama cartoon. It's caught between those two eras, and I think it suffers as a result.
100% agree. And as you're saying, the heroic crew themselves are fairly decent because you've got like Ayaz, who has, you can feel a backstory because he knows people and is
Mhm.
incredibly strong. It's kind of like his big character trait. You've got Tula, who is definitely agile and thiefy like, who could seem to be a little bit on the shadier side. And
Yeah,
you've got Rin, who's young and naive and is an opposite model of Lion-O and He-Man and all those guys because they're generally physically strong. He is dexterous and cunning versus like their physical strength and straightforwardness. Like he
right.
thinks his way out of a lot of problems and then dodges out of issues, but can fight if needed.
Right. And Niddler is a mage in all but name, right? He's a monkey bird, which again, great concept. Mix up two animals together. You know, it's a strong reason, and it's like he's got occult knowledge. He has secret knowledge of the world, but because he is wee, he can't take damage, so he's scared to get into fights. And this crazy kid keeps getting into danger, and so oh my god, I have to save him, but also I don't want to get into a fight. There's a strong dynamic between those two characters. I think where it falls down partially is that Ayaz and Tula, their relationship to Ren is a little opaque to me.
It's
Um,
very weak.
right. So like, as opposed to Thundercats, where everyone's relationship with each other is established 2 episodes in, right? You know exactly how everyone feels about everyone else, and it's all interesting and complicated within the scope of the cartoon's going for. Um, uh, He-Man has it's basically the Superman dynamic, but it leans into that. It's like, okay, these people know who my secret identity is, nobody else does, and I have to balance that out. And Skeletor wants to control Eternia because of reasons, but he's a skull faced dude. That's it, that's his whole role. Whatever. Um, but this shows like it's not quite. He's trying to do both of those and is never quite succeeding, which is just frustrating. And that's why I think I'm so down on it is because this is one of those shows that we talk about a lot where you can see the potential and you get almost kind of mad because it's like this show could have been amazing if it had been done just a little differently, a different time period. Like I could see a mid 80s version of this cartoon and it would be fun. And I could see a mid 90s version of this cartoon and it'd be fun, but they would be two very different cartoons.
Yes. All right. Since we're ending the toyetic run, what are we going to do next, man?
So we're gonna take a bit of a break because it turns out, after doing this for so long, that next episode is going to be our 200th episode. So we've been doing this
Or if you
for
prefer,
so we've been doing this for too long. And so last time we did this for too long, we did a special thing. And so this time, Chris is running a game for me and some other people.
since we keep talking about it, and I don't know if people are familiar with it, I am going to run a Haunted West game for our genreless players since it's our usual group now. So
Yeah,
there you go. They're the genreless players. That's what we're going to label it from going forward.
there we go. Yes, if you remember,
And
our X-Men 97 run is the same group of players from that run.
I'm super excited for them to play it. Some of them haven't played it. Maybe one or two of them have written on it. So I get to play Haunted West. I get to show everyone here what it's like. And after that, I'll go and tell them we're going to go at long last. We bantered, we joked about it. We're going to do a full blown Western run.
Awesome.
And for those people that are curious what it's going to start with, I'll go ahead and tell you now. And Eddie's like, it won't be this. He'll change it before it happens.
I know. You lied to me before.
We're going to do the Great Train Robbery and Stagecoach. Because the Great Train Robbery, some people tell you it's the first Western ever made. It's like a short little thing, catch it on YouTube. It is not. There's actually something before that, but I could.
Oh,
Anyway, we're going to go to the Great Train Robbery and Stagecoach. It's going to be what that episode's about. But that's all after
okay.
the actual plays and everything else.
Right. And I just to be clear, I think there are multiple versions of Stagecoach. We're talking about the 1939 version of Stagecoach.
Correct. John Ford himself. Eddie, if people want to come and give you money and talk to you about Mask or Silverhawks, Thundercats, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and order pizza with you, where can they do that?
Order pizza with me. Well, the best place to talk to me about this stuff would definitely be the Darker Hue Discord, where we're always hanging out, and occasionally we have interesting conversations there. So feel free to swing by and hang out. But if you want to reward this nonsense with money, feel free to stop by my website. That is pugsteady.com. That is where you can find all of my work. And I also have a monthly newsletter. It's for free. You can sign up and I'll tell you all the stuff I've worked on and give you even more things you can buy from me. How about you?
If you're looking to support me, you can come to my website, darkstudios.com. You could buy some books, or you could jump on my Patreon, Harlem Unbounding with Chris Spivey. Or if you really want to give me some shout outs, tell the Arc Dream crew that they did the best job in hiring me to work there with them and help them produce great products that they do. Look at that. Even threw a pitch in for Arc Dream. Man, Eddie, I feel like I'm a professional like you now.
You are officially a corporate sellout.
Yeah. Wish I'd done it for more money though. Anyway, next run's gonna be Haunted West, and we're gonna do a big Western run of 96 different types of Westerns because Eddie refused to let me do any less than that.
Be seeing you.